is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, February 13th, 2025. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Katelyn Burns will be with us to talk about Trump and the Republicans' war on trans people and how to respond in these next 4 years. And later in the show, Jamie Tahsin and Matt Shea will be with us, co-authors of Clown World, 4 years inside Andrew Tate's Manosphere. Also on the program, it's official. The Senate confirms RFK Jr. as HHS Secretary. In a 52-48 vote, Mitch McConnell, who experienced polio when he was younger, the only Republican vote no. Tulsi Gabbard also confirmed as Director of National Intelligence yesterday. Or like Director of Vacant Eyes, but there's a lot of that in the Trump admin. Trump begins slashing the Department of Education, which he says he wants eliminated, and they begin with its Civil Rights Division. But Linda McMahon, his nominee to lead the agency he says he wants to destroy, starts her confirmations hearings today. I mean, why appoint anyone? The Gaza ceasefire is on the brink of collapse as Israel's violence escalates across the West Bank and also in Lebanon. Defense Secretary Hegseth publicly rules out NATO membership for Ukraine and casts cold water on the unrealistic ambitions to return to 2014 borders. I mean, even Obama understood this. Trump tells Ukraine he wants their minerals in exchange for help. Of course. What do you know, folks? Egg prices have hit a record high within the first month of the Trump administration. More than double what they were in August 2023. A Clinton-appointed judge allows Trump's deferred resignation program for federal workers to go through, claiming that the union lacks standing. How do you square that circle? It's literally their workforce that's affected. It seems like a very clear display of having standing. The NIH admits that its freeze on $3 trillion worth of grants is illegal, but Trump's likely to pursue it anyway. Musk's doji groypers head to NASA next. Their boss, Elon, one of the biggest federal contractors, to root out corruption. CBS reports that low-risk migrant detainees, not just dangerous criminals, are being sent to Trump's Guantanamo concentration camp, which is what we've been saying all along. After getting the green light from Pam Bondi, Louisiana's Attorney General files to extradite a New York doctor who sent abortion medication to a pregnant teen in Baton Rouge. Hochul obviously says she won't comply. And lastly, in Canada, Liberals' poll numbers have soared after Trudeau stepped aside and Trump's tariff threats. All this and more on today's Majority Report.
I'm curious if Canadian listeners can let me know why the NDP has tanked also.
I was actually doing a little bit of reading about this last night. I think it's also tanked in part because there was an issue of electoral representation that put them in conflict with the liberals, but I need to do a little bit more research. We're going to, I think, have a guest on Monday to talk about Canada as the elections approach. But it's a remarkable turnaround after kicking Trudeau to the curb. You could see just like the graph after that, but also Trump's tariff threats go skyrocketing. And a few months ago, it looked like the best case scenario was that the Conservatives would not be able to form a government, and even that looked completely insane and like a slim chance that would happen. And now it's possible that the Liberals are the ones who might win. Poilievre, it looks he looks like he's subservient to Trump, and people are pissed. Like Trump revived Canadian nationalism, and it benefited Liberals. Oddly,
David Griscom and I played some videos on Left Reckoning of Canadians that were saying, all right, Trump, take us. We want to be the 51st state, which is a very odd position for a nationalist to be in, to be welcoming another country to take yours over. But
yeah, good point. But obviously, I mentioned RFK Jr. confirmed. I mean, if I were to, I think I was talking about this with Francesca Fiorentini on her show, if I had a magic wand or a genie wish and I could have only picked one nominee to block, I think it would have been RFK Jr. Hegseth is an abuser of women, according to his own mother, and completely incompetent. But like RFK Jr. and the damage that he could do to public health is indescribable. And we're already seeing areas like in Texas where 1 in 5 children are unvaccinated, an outbreak of measles. And that's not just confined to folks who chose not to get their kids vaccinated. That means that it can metastasize and affect other people, even if they are vaccinated. So I'm really concerned about just the general population and disease with RFK Jr. at the helm. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that, I think, maybe in the fun half. But more breaking news this morning. Senator Tina Smith of, gosh, I really am becoming Sam. Tina Smith of Minnesota says that she's not going to be seeking re-election. So that means that one of Minnesota's 2 Senate seats will be available. And I don't think it's a coincidence that with that announcement coming today, yesterday, Dean Phillips, who was a congressman from Minnesota, decided to go on CNN and say this. Bradley, if we could pull this up. He ran for president. People may remember. He was a part of that odd robocall scheme in New Hampshire that used AI Biden's voice, right, to tell people not to go out to the polls because it had to be a write-in campaign because Jamie Harrison and Biden moved South Carolina against the wishes and against the law in the state law in New Hampshire to make South Carolina the first primary. Iowa's the first caucus, but South Carolina first. He was a bit of an odd duck, but he got some brownie points for being one of the only Democrats to call out Biden's failing cognition and his age. However, no,
Castro's the real hero on that front.
Yes, calling it out to his face back in the 2020 primary. This guy's an opportunist, and it seems abundantly clear based on these comments that he makes about Elon Musk on CNN yesterday.
And that was a proposition of mine. Unfortunately, Democrats are only focused on one thing right now, Mr. Musk. The fact of the matter, he's quite popular. He has the largest platform in human history, which is, of course, Twitter/X. And I think we're missing the boat as Democrats. And all I'm saying is that sometimes it's better to join them and actually play a role in how the strategy works rather than so pathetically, frankly, try to combat something that clearly is a steamroller, and Democrats are being steamrolled. And I'm deeply concerned about that. Yes, Musk is not elected. He has no accountability other than Donald Trump, and that's a frightening combination. And I don't want to cross my fingers. I think Democrats should join the club and then have more credibility to actually raise the alarm about constitutional issues. Right now, it's the boy who cried wolf.
Well, wait. So let me get this straight. The Democrats need to join the club to have credibility about combating it. So basically, they're a steamroller, so we need to roll over or lay on our back and let the steamroller roll over us, flatten us, and then maybe we'll be taken seriously. What phenomenal advice, because then he tacks on that he's concerned about it. But frankly, he's wrong about Musk's popularity. We're already seeing this play out in poll numbers. I know you guys yesterday played that video of that farmer who's going to be affected by these freezes. This doesn't just happen on the internet. Stop bringing troll logic and legitimizing it when we're talking about government functioning. This is the tail wagging the dog. Elon Musk, here it is from YouGov. More Americans view Elon Musk very or somewhat unfavorably, 52% than favorably, according to YouGov. This share, who they have a very unfavorable opinion of Musk, increased 7 percentage points in the past week. The share who say, I should say, they have a very unfavorable opinion of Musk, increased 7 percentage points in the past week to 43% from 36%. That's just very unfavorable. The shift was especially pronounced among independents and younger adults. And then this was also from Quinnipiac. Just last month, he already was unpopular, if you could just scroll down to the numbers. 53% of respondents said they are not in favor of Elon Musk playing a prominent role in the Trump administration. 39% said they are in favor. And that was, that poll came out January 29th. So Dean Phillips, who I would guess based on the timing of this media appearance, is trying to run for Senate in Minnesota. By gosh, we got to keep him away from that because he's openly advocating for appeasing the fascists while saying, yeah, the fascists are doing something really bad. Way to read the room, because Musk's approval rating is not going to go up the more the actual pain is felt of what he's trying to do here. I mean, the Department of Education is a prime example of that. You want to eliminate the Department of Education? That is not a popular idea. I'm sorry. People love our public schools.
This is about rich Democrats. Dean Phillips, my mic just went down. Dean Phillips's mother married the heir to a distilling company, Phillips. You might have heard of that. When they say Dean Phillips is a businessman, it's because that's where he went after college to make a lot of money, is the family business, which is a liquor company. There is a wide consensus among rich people right now that goes far beyond Elon Musk, who is a complete psycho, cartoon villain, but also our upstanding business partners like Mark Zuckerberg and all these folks that probably take meetings with Ro Khanna. They all don't mind this stuff. They don't mind the hatchet being taken to the parts of the administrative state that serve people. They're looking to streamline it for profit maximization purposes, and they're going to grind up people in the meantime.
The voices like Dean Phillips need to be extricated from the party altogether. Hakeem Jeffries is an extension of this, going to appease these Silicon Valley techno-fascists and say, like, hey, can we get a few of the good ones on our side? That's exactly what's enabled this hellscape that we're experiencing right now, which people may recall. This tech industry in Silicon Valley was the darling of the Democratic Party for much of the origins of it. And they built them up. They enabled this kind of grotesque wealth concentration. And then what happens, as it does with every industry under capitalism that gets really big, they're going to go to the guys that are going to give them the real thing, which is the Republican Party. So this is where you have to draw a line in the sand. And there's a fork in the road here. You have Hakeem Jeffries going to Silicon Valley to appease these folks. And you have Bernie Sanders, who is starting a tour across the country to speak to voters in districts that went from Biden to Trump in 2020 to 2024. Which road are we going to go down? Because I do see some people, Democrats, that you wouldn't even expect outside of leadership, seeing, okay, we have to change course. But right now, the leadership is dragging down this particular party at this moment. And Phillips he's not in government anymore. But if he runs and is successful in Minnesota, this is like truly just a slow death of the party, frankly, if that is how we choose to proceed. But hopefully like Keith Ellison runs or something like that in Minnesota. Ilhan Omar, oh my God, I'd love it. But
there's an entire flock of media commentators, the sort of Iglesias types, that would want nothing more than for this to blow over and just maintain and come back into power as your enemies defeat themselves. Never mind the amount of damage they do that ultimately hurts your coalition. And we know this is what they want to do because it's what UK Labour did, and UK Labour sent advisors. They swap advisors back and forth. And I mean, when they're not working for the Tories like Obama guys did. But the Democrats right now, there's a certain type of Democrat that thinks Trump is going to get so unpopular that we're just going to ride back in. And to a certain extent, it worked for a lot of them. It wasn't just the good Democrats like AOC and stuff that came in on the 2018 wave. A lot of losers came in too. And we need to be very clear about what kind of Democrats need to be supported or not supported.
I don't know why I didn't think of this, but Martig writes in, people are thinking Walz. That is the kind of candidate that I think could have, we would want to support, right? I mean, I want to see who else jumps into the race, but in terms of a guy like Dean Phillips versus a guy like Walz, pretty easy to make that decision. And
while we're just talking Minnesota, Omar Fateh over Jacob Fry, not even close, folks. Get activated for Fateh, who was central, among other things, leading the drivers' rights against the ride-sharing companies. Oh, and now that we're on the topic of local politics, if you have not changed your party registration to Democrat, today is the deadline to do that. If you want to vote for a particular candidate that perhaps Zoran. I'm ranking him first, but I'm already a registered Democrat. But you can't participate in the primary if you're not a registered Democrat, which I think some folks who might be inclined to vote for Zoran Mamdani or rank him first at the very least might be. Can I name my top 5 candidates?
Yes.
Zoran, and Zoran.
Okay, but do you know who you're going to rank second?
No.
All right.
I'm not worried about that right now.
Well, we'll figure it out. But either way, I'm excited about that candidacy. As I say, it's a fork in the road. And the New York could go down that road right now. I mean, he's getting some real momentum, but we have to be making these, we have to be diligent across the country. And a guy like Dean Phillips can't see the light of day. Let's not have him be a senator from Minnesota, which would just be an outrage, frankly.
Just like putting Latimer and Wesley Bell. And did you see Wesley Bell's video?
No.
Of like things we've been doing?
Gosh, they're really taking what Cory Booker had some, I guess this was with the senators, but Cory Booker had a meeting about how they have to be more involved on social media. And it's like,
yeah, take some crypto out, buddy.
Can you please just talk to AOC instead of Cory Booker, folks? And just go to your friends in the house and ask some questions there. All right. A quick word from our sponsors, and then we will be talking to Katelyn Burns. I'm so glad that this sponsor is back because this product is a staple for me in the morning. I loved eating cereal as a kid, but as an adult, you feel a little guilty with all that sugar. And I need protein in the morning to get my energy up. So the perfect solution is Magic Spoon. A nostalgically delicious cereal that tastes just like my childhood favorites, but without the sugar and with tons of protein. Magic Spoon has also turned their super popular cereal into high-protein treats that are light, crispy, and taste just like those classic crunchy cereal bars. Magic Spoon's treats are so delicious and have already become my favorite before and after gym snack. This is true. My morning gym routine is I wake up early, I eat one of these Magic Spoon protein bars, I go back to bed for an hour, and then I go to the gym. And it gives me enough protein and energy to get going in the morning. Every serving of Magic Spoon high-protein cereal has crazy macros: 13 grams of protein, 0 grams of sugar, and 4 grams of net carbs. They come in so many nostalgic flavors like cocoa and cinnamon roll. You've got fruity, you've got peanut butter, birthday cake, chocolate chip cookies, and all of that. It tastes great, and you can look on the back of the label and know that you're not eating all that sugar and you're getting a lot of protein. Magic Spoon's high-protein treats are crispy, crunchy, airy, and an easy way to get 12 grams of protein on the go. They come with mouth-watering flavors like marshmallow, chocolate peanut butter, and dark chocolate. I love those treats. I really, really swear they've become a staple in my life, and I can swear by them. Really love Magic Spoon for their cereal, but also for these bars. Get $5 off your next magicspoon.com orders and go to magicspoon.com/majority report. Or look for Magic Spoon on Amazon or in your nearest grocery store. That's magicspoon.com/majority report for $5 off. Again, magicspoon.com/majority report for $5 off. And lastly, we've talked about Manakora honey before. Its richness, its creaminess, how delicious it is, and how it has health benefits. Manakora honey is the most delicious honey that you've ever had. It's ethically produced in Manakora's master beekeepers in the remote forests of New Zealand. Manakora honey contains powerful nutrients to support immunity and gut health. The bees collect the nectar from the Manakora tree in New Zealand. The nectar is packed with bioactives, and the honey is produced has 3 times more antioxidants and prebiotics than your average honey. The special antibacterial compound called MGO also comes from the nectar of the tea tree. Manakora's third-party tests every single harvest for MGO and makes these results available through their QR system. It is a game changer. All you need is 1 heaped teaspoon each morning to get the most out of the amazing bioactives in Manakora honey. Additional usage throughout the day is completely fine, especially helping to cut out other sweeteners. So you can put it in your tea. You can put it in, again, as just like a sweet tooth supplement. And this is off-label, but if you have like a little bit of a cold sore issue, probably once a year I get those. This is not the most flattering fact I care to share, but it's the truth. You put a little bit of this Manakora honey on it, and it helps like at least just reduce the kind of pain that you're experiencing, and it helps with healing. That's just my experience. Thanks to Manakora for supporting the Majority Report. Now it's easier than ever to try Manakora honey. Head to manakora.com/majority to get $25 off the starter kit, which comes with an MGO 850 plus Manuka honey jar, 5 honey travel sticks, a wooden spoon, and a guidebook. That's manakora.com/majority for $25 off your starter kit. manukora.com/majority for $25 off your starter kit. All right, folks, quick break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Katelyn Burns. We are back, and we are joined by Katelyn Burns, freelance journalist, columnist for Xtra and MSNBC. She was the first openly transgender Capitol Hill reporter in U.S. history. Katelyn, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
So, as somebody who has covered politics on Capitol Hill, can you describe what the first less than month of the Trump administration has been like in its aggressive attack on trans rights?
It's not been great. It's certainly not a great time to be a trans person in the U.S. right now. I think of most concern for most trans people is the situation with our passports. We don't really have a lot of answers right now as to whether we can even renew passports. It seems completely dependent on sort of what you had on your passport before and what the government feels like you should have now. And there are some unconfirmed reports, I want to say, of trans people actually having their passports confiscated just before foreign travel, which are concerning. But beyond that, I mean, the executive order on gender affirming care for minors essentially backdoors a national ban on gender affirming care for kids. And you're starting to see hospitals just completely capitulate, even in bright blue areas like New York or LA. So I think those two are the most concerning at this point.
Let's start tackle the first piece about the passports. I can say this as somebody who has a trans man in my life, sent in their passport right after Trump's election to try to get a renewal. Hasn't heard anything, can't get through, can't get it back. And he's hearing from other people that that's the same experience. And basically, there's no answers here. Like, my question was, well, can you at least get the old document back? Because there's going to be still some time left and before it expires potentially. But it seems like they're just not sending them back when people tried to renew.
Yeah, this is part of the confusion that is happening right now is we don't know the answer. And I have personal friends who are trans, obviously a lot of them, as you may suspect. And even myself, my passport expires in 2 years. I don't know what the situation is going to be when I go to renew it. And people come to me because I'm supposed to be a source of answers, especially on the political side of things. Like, what's going on with the passport thing? I'm like, I don't, like, nobody knows. Nobody has any answers. They haven't really released a guideline. I think there was some tenuous guidelines that were leaked early last week that had to do with X marked passports, like the third gender marking. And there hasn't been really anything for. My worry is I changed my gender marker on my passport to F in 2017. But before that, when I was 17 years old, I had a passport for a school trip to France that was a male marked passport. So we're hearing reports now that they have records of your past passports, and they're going back and checking everybody who renews for that gender marker. So my concern is if I go today to renew my passport that expires in 2 years, they're just going to take my passport away completely, and now I can't leave the country. And that is certainly very concerning given just the avalanche of hate that the conservative side of this country has been launching at trans people for the last decade.
And outside of the travel piece, can you explain the practical implications of trans folks not having a current government document that accurately identifies their gender?
Yeah, so ever since Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State allowed trans people to change their gender marker without getting bottom surgery, this has been the only way for red state trans people to have an official government ID that shows, their transition gender, if you will, their true gender identity. It was a way to bypass the state process of, well, my state doesn't allow me to change my gender on my driver's license or on my birth certificate, but at least now with a passport, I have something. So if you go to apply for a job, you have to present either one primary documentation of your ID that shows you're eligible to work in the United States, or two minor documents. So most people just show their birth certificate and their driver's license, and that's two minor forms of documentation. But for a trans person in a red state that can't change those, they're now immediately outing themselves to their employer. And that has actually been a vector for kind of rampant discrimination in the past. And the great thing about the passport is that is a primary documentation of your identity. So you can just hand your passport to your employer that has the correct gender marker, and you're not outing yourself as a trans person to a potentially hostile work environment. So losing this outside of the travel component is also very devastating.
I'd imagine, hopefully, the beginnings of some organization around solidarity on this issue. Is there with trans people at the very least, but is there discussion about how potentially like a labor union could protect from some of this discrimination? Or is this basically just because the Trump administration is opening up the doors, there's not going to be any enforcement?
Yeah, so historically, labor unions have been a really good layer of protection for trans workers, especially on the healthcare front. When labor unions are negotiating contracts, one very easy thing they can do is just write it in as a requirement in their contract that the company has to cover gender affirming care. And we've seen that historically. That's part of sort of the wave of access that has come about within trans care since, I would say, 2014 or so. But on the ID front, I don't think that there's much that unions can really do, other than maybe building into their contract a non-discrimination clause. But even then, it's not going to prevent like widespread discrimination. Most of this country still, unfortunately, is not unionized workplaces. So anybody not working in a union shop would still be subject to potential discrimination, even though it's technically illegal right now, according to the Supreme Court.
Although, of course, we know that that is a fluid situation given its extremist far-right orientation. You mentioned the way that the hospitals are responding to the Trump administration. I know there were protests here in New York City outside of NYU. Langone, I believe, was the hospital. And more escalation, more protests are escalating and cropping up across the country. What can you tell us about where that stands at the moment?
Yeah, I don't know what to say about NYU Langone. I don't live in New York City, although I have a lot of friends who are there. I do know that one of their higher ups in the decision-making chain is quite conservative, so I was not shocked to learn that they would jump on this bandwagon quickly. I'll also note that I believe that there's going to be a contract negotiation between some nurses in Brooklyn and NYU Langone that sort of intersects with this. I know that there were some of them at the trans protests as well. So this might be a moment for some solidarity between the union movement in this country and trans people. But I will say in other places in the country, around the country, hospital systems are responding to these protests. There have been several who have announced that they were canceling, or they very quietly were starting to cancel appointments for trans youth. And then they saw these massive protests outside their doors, and now they're switching course. And you're also seeing pressure from blue state attorney generals. I mean, in New York, it's illegal to discriminate in healthcare decisions against trans people. So I believe Letitia James came out and said, if you don't provide this care, it's a violation of state law. So there's still like layers of protection there for folks that I think are going to end up being settled in the courts. And that makes me very, very nervous. Right.
And there's just so many different fronts here, right? Like you wrote a piece in Xtra about the effects of Trump's actions on the search for missing trans kids.
Yeah.
You know, we know that unhoused and homeless youth and just people, disproportionately LGBTQ people are represented. But can you explain more about the effects on those search efforts based on Trump's actions of just like blowing up the federal government and Doge or whatever the hell?
Yeah, so the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children operates basically from a Department of Justice grant. And they heard this week from the DOJ that funding would be threatened if they didn't strip all references to trans kids from their website. And also, when they put out reports on specific missing children, if they happen to be trans, they have to use the child's dead name and birth sex, basically. So the piece that I wrote is, how the heck are you supposed to find a missing trans kid if you're looking for somebody who doesn't use that name that you're searching for them under and doesn't even present as the sex that you're saying that they were? And you also can't note that they were trans. This is where Trump's executive orders, you know, they're attempting to define a reality without trans people, but trans people still exist within our reality. Just because the president doesn't believe that trans people exist doesn't mean that there isn't a missing trans kid out there. And you can't just rule by fiat that trans people are invalid. and
I would
don't
imagine
exist.
trans kids are also subjected to human trafficking, which is all I hear from the right. If we're looking for missing children, that a child can still be trans and be sexually exploited.
Yes.
But I mean, their reaction to that would be, "Who cares?" Basically.
Yeah, it's quite disgusting.
Yeah.
The way they look at it. And then if there is a trans kid who is sexually exploited from an early age, they will say, "Oh, well, that's why they're trans."
Right.
And that's the sort of second very insidious part that goes along with this.
Same playbook with gay kids as well. Was we love them, but they're victims, so we have to just basically show them tough love, and it's. But this element of erasure is also specifically pronounced with trans people. And you also wrote a piece for your Patreon that was very critical of the New York Times, which, sometimes media criticism can, we've talked about, can be a little bit of a lazy thing when we engage in it, because it's more like, let's just talk about the politics of it. But the New York Times over the past 4 years on two incredibly important issues has been actively misleading folks. I would say on the genocide in Gaza and on the issue of trans rights, where they put out endless op-eds and endless articles essentially questioning trans identity and portraying it as a bit of a trend. And now that Trump gets back into office, the editorial board has the gall to come out and talk about protecting trans people. If you could just explain the context of why people are outraged and about the Times doing this about face right now.
I'm glad you're letting me talk about this, because I am an OG New York Times hater.
Solidarity, yes.
So basically, they came up with this op-ed, and it was mostly about the trans military ban that Trump has reinstated, which is a very unpopular policy that he had in his first term. I covered it extensively back then. But I was reading it, and I don't typically read them, but this one I made an exception for, and I just got so mad because they're talking about these executive orders and how cruel they are. And they're going through the impacts on trans people. They're talking about trans kids, trans athletes, the passport thing. And I'm like, each one of these things has been addressed either by both your news and opinion sections or by your opinion section. Like you employ multiple opinion writers who just flat out deny that trans people exist. I don't know if you want me to name them, but I'm happy to.
Go ahead. I mean, one of them is out now, right? Pamela Paul.
Pamela Paul, yeah.
We still have some stragglers.
She was the polite liberal transphobe on the staff, but you had David French, who has a long history, even before writing for the Times, of just demonizing trans people in, the most polite conservative way. Ross Douthat is, I think my first draft called him a conservative Catholic cuck, which I'm allowed to say because I am also a Catholic cuck. So.
Very nice.
It's not just the opinion side either. They have several reporters who just, it feels like they have an agenda.
Right. And can you explain why that is? It's always like we're pursuing this truth. There must be something here where we can portray both sides. But by asking some of these questions repeatedly and with the emphasis they do, they call into question kind of just basic facts about trans identity. And it's this paternalism that bothers me of we know better as New York Times reporters than the very people who are saying this is my reality. Well, that if you could just explain what that's like and
Yeah, I mean, I always start this off by saying that, gender affirming care for youth is probably the most prominent one that they go long on all the time. And the treatment that they're attacking has been endorsed by every major American medical association in existence. It's endorsed by numerous international boards. The French government just came out basically and said the affirming approach is the correct one. So you have this laundry list of just the biggest medical experts in the world basically saying this is the right treatment. And then you have like a handful of crank doctors on the other side saying, well, no, we think there's an issue with it. And the New York Times gives both of them equal weight, or sometimes gives the crank doctors even more weight. It reminds me a lot of the climate change debate, which they, I think, pretty much did the same thing. But I'll say this about the New York Times. I think that they, more than any other news organization, did more to take transphobia from a fringe right-wing position to making it this hotly contested political issue that we have now.
By bringing it into polite liberal discourse, essentially, right?
Correct, yeah.
And I would say hyping up hysteria in communities like wealthier suburban communities that about this being some sort of thing they'd have to worry about with their child, that it's spreading like almost like they portray it as it's an infection or something like that, yeah. Right? And it's crazy because in 2022 we saw the Republicans try to run on transphobia, and they did not do well in that election cycle. But it's hard for me to assess if it's just like kind of Trump and his force of personality, or if it's what you described, this like normalization of transphobia by these elite media institutions, or it's probably both.
Yeah, I do think that the trans athlete issue, more than any other, is the most difficult for the left to counter. I've written about that issue more than probably any of the others in my career, but that's also because I have a degree in sport management. I was an athlete growing up myself. I have an inherent interest in it. People forget I also have 2 cisgender daughters. So I can see all sides of this issue, and my focus has always been on the science. And I don't think people have a grasp on the science of trans athletes. I'm not going to sit here and recite it back to you now because it would take too long. But I wish that science would lead on the trans athlete debate instead of like this gut feeling, quote unquote, common sense that we get from conservatives and a lot of quote unquote conservative liberals.
Well, I mean, it's a gut feeling because it's just this like old adage about protecting little white girls that you'll see across, you'll see in historical portrayals of Indigenous Americans, of Black Americans and their threat to white women. I mean, that like what's her name? The 5th place idiot swimmer, Riley Gaines. Like that's what she's invoking. And that when people say that's their gut reaction, it's like, have you ever seen especially prepubescent kids playing sports? Yeah. Like there's nothing you need to worry about. And if these trans girls get their gender affirming care in the way that they need, none of this is going to be an issue. It wouldn't even be an issue without that, but it's solved just by trans care immediately. But then those same folks are disinterested and skeptical of trans care.
Right. It's really interesting that when they're making a medical argument, it's this like horribly irreversible, permanent, drastic change. But when it comes to trans athletes, trans care doesn't do anything, actually. Yeah. They're talking out of both sides of their mouths. And I mean, I've seen my own athletic performance. It dipped dramatically. I was a runner when I transitioned, although I haven't been able to run since getting COVID. And my times took an immediate dip when I started estrogen. That's unscientific. Like there wasn't anybody studying the before and the after. It was just my anecdotal report. But every trans person I know that was an athlete before will tell you this. So to us, it's common sense. To everybody else, it's like, these men who think that they are physically superior to all women. It's the same people who think that if they played Serena Williams in a tennis match that they could win a point off of her. And it's like, no, you're not going to.
Right.
You just overestimate your own abilities. It's like the guys who think that they can wrestle a bear and win. It's like, no, you would die.
And as we wrap up, Katelyn, I guess that part of it is really, I think, important for people to just think about. The over focus in particular on trans women versus trans men. Can you talk a little bit about what conservatives, why they're fixated particularly on trans women? I have my own theories, but what's your assessment?
I think it's
girls, I should say, trans women and girls. Yeah.
I think that it's easy to demonize the appearance of a trans woman, especially somebody like me who transitioned a little older, and maybe doesn't pass as well. I think it's easy to portray us as this grotesque other, when in actuality we're your next door neighbor. We're the best player in your video game lobby. Sorry, it's true. We use your grocery store. That I could go into everything. We are your neighbors. But it's very easy in an online setting to go, they could take my worst selfie, and believe me, I've taken bad ones. Who hasn't? And say, look at this person. You believe that as a woman? And it's very, very easy to radicalize folks. And I think that's why there's so much focus on trans women. And the thought that I'll leave you with is this. The arguments for trans rights, in other words, what trans people are asking for from society, haven't changed in 50 years. I found a speech the other day from the 1974 St. Christopher Street rally of a famous trans woman. I apologize. Her name escapes me off the top of my head. It's the "Y'all better quiet down" speech. If you're LGBT, you probably have heard of that. But she's talking about trans people in prisons. She's talking about how gay and trans people can't find housing. Gay and trans people can't find work. And those are the same issues that we've been asking for, the same rights that we've been asking for the last 50 years. So there's this sense on the right that I think pervaded quote unquote normie society that, trans rights went too far. And my counter is I think you all became way more obsessed with us because what we're asking for hasn't changed in all of that time. I think that you all just needed somebody else to focus on once gay marriage became the law of the land.
Yep. Senate Twink, great name, writes in Sylvia Rivera.
Thank you. Sorry.
There you go.
Truly embarrassing. I couldn't remember that.
Yeah, well, our audience is very smart and on top of it, and I always love to kiss their ass as well. So thanks so much, Katelyn. Really appreciate your time today. Where can people support your work? I know you have a Patreon and you write some other places as well.
Yeah, so I have a laundry list of side gigs, I like to say. So patreon.com/Katelyn Burns. I'm also co-founder of the FlyTrap, which is an independent feminist media newsletter. And lastly, I am co-host of the Cancel Me Daddy podcast, where we make fun of all the people who complain about cancel culture.
Oh, fun. I think I'm going to be tuning in for catharsis on that front. We'll put a link to all that below wherever people are listening to or watching this. Thanks so much, Katelyn. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
All right, folks, quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking to Jamie Tahsin and Matt Shea about their investigative work on Andrew Tate and the Manosphere. Be right back. We are back, and we are joined now by Jamie Tahsin and Matt Shea, authors of Clown World: 4 Years Inside Andrew Tate's Manosphere. Welcome, guys. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So, of course, you were investigating Andrew Tate for around 4 years, and this started when you guys were with Vice in 2019. For people in our audience that may not be familiar with Andrew Tate and the Manosphere, what is it, and why is it important, I think, in this particular moment in history to understand it? Either of you, go ahead, whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, sure. So the Manosphere is kind of a broad term for a group of sort of individual groups amongst themselves that make up sort of men's online rights activists. And it includes groups like incels, the involuntary celibates, who get quite a lot of press attention, pickup artists who were particularly popular in kind of the earlier era of the Manosphere, men that would teach other men how to get women, and also these kind of red pill male influencers who try to sort of explain away the woes of the world by essentially blaming it on women and the failure of feminism and modern liberal society. Andrew Tate is a influencer who kind of comes in some sense from 2 or 3 of the worlds within the Manosphere. He's a bit of a red pillar. He's a bit of a pickup artist. And he became incredibly famous in 2022, dominating social media platforms, basically showing his ostentatious, lavish lifestyle, making incredibly shocking misogynistic comments, and selling courses teaching other men how to make money online and be just like him.
And Matt, how did his popularity increase? Like, what was the origins of his popularity? How did he come into the public eye? And I saw some poll of British men under the age of 18 that showed him like a few years ago having above 50% popularity, which is deeply concerning. Maybe that's taken a hit, but like there was a time where he really was doing the influencing thing, actually influencing people.
I think he still is. I think first we should get an idea of the scale of that popularity. So by many metrics, Andrew Tate at his peak was the most famous person in the world. One of the most successful people of all time on social media. At one point was the most Googled man in the world. You pointed out a study in the UK that shows that, at one point, a majority of young boys and men had a positive view of him. There's similar polls reflect his support in the US, in Australia, and all around the world, really. And when you consider the extreme views that he's putting out there, this might come as quite a shock. But the way he achieved that fame and that popularity was he was one of these people who was kind of an early realizer of the fact that the louder and more controversial you are, the more that the algorithms on various social media platforms will push you out. And the speed at which he became, by many metrics, the most famous man in the world is unprecedented in history, really. It was a matter of months that he was able to kind of take over Twitter, TikTok. And I think that, one of the main ways he was able to do that was simply by being controversial and being loud, and the algorithms favored that. But also he did have a pretty kind of clever scheme where he would essentially create an affiliate marketing program where you would you were encouraged, his followers were encouraged to share content of him, specifically more controversial content. And underneath the videos that they shared, there would be a sign-up link to his online courses where you would learn how to become supposedly wealthy and successful like him and how to become an alpha male. And so if someone signed up through your link underneath your video you posted of Andrew Tate, you would get a percentage of the sign-up fee. So it was kind of like he financially incentivized young men all across the world to make him famous. And he had a kind of social media marketing team, a small team of young guys. It's not some crazy sophisticated operation. If anything, it shows just how easy it is to manipulate these social media algorithms. A few guys in a house somewhere in Romania can basically manipulate the algorithms to make someone the most famous man in the world overnight.
And what did his content look like? What were some of the major themes? how did he break through the noise? I mean, there are a lot of folks on the internet, like Nick Fuentes or whatever, that say the most outrageous things possible, but they don't get to the peak of his popularity.
So he made some really shocking misogynistic comments. He spoke about women should in part be responsible for their own rapes because they put themselves in situations to be raped. He said the world would be a better place if women had the number of men they'd had sex with tattooed on their forehead. But he would also do videos that kind of trod the line between, is he joking or is he not? So he did a video like why men shouldn't hang out with their sisters, where he sort of explained why he didn't hang out with his sister, because one, she was a liberal Bernie supporter, but two, men should only hang out with other strong men. If you hang out with women, it makes you weak. So it was kind of a mixture of content, and it was the more shocking content that went most viral. But what Tate did quite cleverly is, and he said this explicitly to us, he said, like, I'm selling the James Bond lifestyle. So along with all the misogyny, he also had himself traveling the world, going on yachts in Croatia, high rises in Dubai. So he was shocking, but he also had this lifestyle element that young men were kind of drawn to in a really shallow way in many ways. The other side of Tate's content, which is now coming more to light, but something which we were kind of investigating from the get-go, was the content of his actual courses. These are like video courses, kind of like masterclasses if you were learning filmmaking with Scorsese, but instead it's how to be a horrible person with Andrew Tate. And one of his most famous and early courses was called the Tate PhD, which he thought was a very clever play on words, as it stood for the pimping hose degree. And in that course, he essentially taught men how to find and attract essentially vulnerable women who they could then groom into working for them in the online sex industry. Tate himself has always been very open about the fact that where he first made his money was in running online sex webcam companies, for which he's now under investigation for allegations of human trafficking.
And that, I guess, was a part of his move to Romania in 2017, where then the authorities are continuing their investigation into him as well. People may have seen some of the photos of him kind of in captivity by the police forces there. But that move to Romania, Matt, could you talk a little bit about the timing of that? It feels like they're also at this very time in history, Me Too was a big phenomenon in the United States and in the UK. His popularity rising as this movement for kind of female activism against rape culture was increasing seems like it's not a coincidence at all.
Yeah, I mean, we now know that he moved to Romania after a police investigation into him for rape and physical abuse, allegations which he denies of at least 3 women back in the UK. At the time, he ran a webcam sex studio in the UK, and he did say that, you know, he often said that Romania is a country where you can get away with more. And specifically in the context of sexual assault accusations. You know, he may say he was joking about that, but that is around the time he moved to Romania. Of course, the Romanian authorities then, as Jamie said, did arrest him and formally indict him for human trafficking and a series of other very serious criminal allegations, which he denies, but which he's yet to stand trial for. So, you know, it turns out that if he was moving to Romania because he thought the authorities would be more lenient to him there, it turns out they were actually, that was not the case, very far from it. But is Andrew Tate a reaction to the kind of Me Too movement? It's something that gets brought up a lot. I think, I mean, you can certainly see that, like, there is a, you know, he's encouraging young men and men to potentially act in a misogynistic way, which runs counter to the Me Too movement. But I think what you're really seeing is you're seeing a lot of lonely, a lot of men who feel that for whatever reason, they haven't lived up to their idea of masculinity, whether that is having lots of sex with beautiful women, whether that's having fast cars, whether that's being rich, whether that's being good at fighting, whatever their image of masculinity that they felt they were promised, they aren't living up to it. And there's an element of self-hate and lack of self-worth there, fragility. And a lot of that, especially with young men, is to do with sex. It's to do with, I am not getting the sex I feel I deserve. That's what the whole incel, involuntary celibate movement is about. There's always been men, though, right, who feel that they're not getting, laid as much as they want to be. And there's always been charlatans and pickup artists who've come in to try to help them. What's different is that group of men has now kind of metastasized into a kind of political movement that thinks that they're not getting the sex they're owed, not just because they have, crappy game with women or whatever, but because things like the Me Too movement, things like feminism, things like women having access to too many male partners, too much free choice, they feel that they are owed sex and that women and feminism is denying it them. And so they need to sort of loudly reclaim this version of masculinity. I mean, ultimately, though, that is a fragile masculinity. That's a kind of a destroyed male ego trying to claw back at something.
Yeah, and the opposition needs to do a better job of defining positive masculinity, frankly. But Jamie, you both have been talking about how he integrated this with influencer culture, which is, presents things aspirationally and can maybe look like, this is what it looks like to be an actualized man. All you've got to do is sign up for my courses and everything will be solved for you. Like, when you talk about it being a political force, it's hard to ignore that in this country, Donald Trump defeated Kamala Harris. He talked about beating her up, or what it was, Mike Tyson beating her up. The initial reaction to her entering the race was, she didn't deserve it. She slept her way to the top. Trump wins. Abortion's on the ballot as well. And then he nominates a bunch of people that have been credibly accused of major sexual assault, like Pete Hegseth, to one of the top positions. Steve Bannon harnessed Gamergate to initially build Trump's support of like these online misogynistic communities. It feels like this is really the culmination of that political force, in addition to other things about Trump. But really, this is a big piece of it, having success in this country.
Yeah, and Tate has played a big part in that promotion of Trump in the US. And the relationship between Tate and the Trump seemingly goes back further than most people would be aware of. Andrew Tate had a meeting with Donald Trump Jr. back in 2019. They took a photo together, which Tate used to sell one of his other courses on networking. Tate had Mike Cernovich, the sort of famous alt-right commentator who, assisted Donald Trump in some ways in his first election. Cernovich attended one of Tate's War Room summits as a professor in Romania, the very first one. And we found a lot of links between Tate and sort of the MAGA right. And a lot of them seem to come through this guy called Miles Sonkin, an American citizen who we essentially investigated and uncovered the true identity of in our book. He goes by the name of Iggy Semmelweis and sort of LARPs as a wizard, sorry. But he had lots of connections with kind of MAGA land and put those people in touch with Tate. And I think it was kind of a symbiotic relationship in that Tate had lots of young male fans, and that was useful to Trump, particularly as we saw in the most recent election. But also in the era of Trump, politics has become the best way to get traction on social media, talking about political issues. And Tate really, really latched onto that as well. Obviously diving down the more conspiratorial end, but there has been this sort of symbiotic relationship between Trump and the Tates.
And Matt, who are some of the other players in like the almost extended universe for Andrew Tate that people may be familiar with? I mean, Fresh and Fit is the first kind of duo that comes to mind.
Yeah, Fresh and Fit. They're sort of in the kind of misogyny shock jock world, quite big. Sneeko, people like Aiden Ross, but
Trump appeared on his stream.
Trump appeared on his stream. Yeah, it's really, really crazy to think that Trump appeared on the stream of one of Andrew Tate's biggest sycophants. It's crazy, but
recommended to him by his son Barron.
Also, one of the Trump children has met with Tate, right, Jamie?
Yeah, Trump Jr. and also a current Trump staffer before becoming a Trump staffer spent 2 days staying at Tate's house in Romania. There are lots of connections between them. Trump had a photo op in the run-up to the recent election with Justin Waller, who's another friend of Tate's, has lived in Romania with Tate and is a member of his war room that we investigated.
We investigated for being a global cult that trains men how to groom women into sex work.
I want to get to that next. For
sure.
Like, yeah.
This is really serious stuff that the American right and Republican Party are associating themselves with people that they may not even realize are accused of incredibly serious crimes. Elon Musk, now we also have like kind of boosting Andrew Tate. I mean, Elon Musk reinstated Andrew Tate on X, but he also has like retweeted and supported him on Twitter recently. And yeah, this comes at a time where, you know, we've talked about the extreme side, but then you also have lots of stuff in between. You have Joe Rogan, you have Dana White, the founder of UFC, and their influence on a kind of another kind of fragile masculinity, which we saw that in Mark Zuckerberg, who put Dana White on his board at the same time as he went on Joe Rogan to kind of proclaim that we needed to be more masculine, and in his tech company Meta needed to be more masculine and become too effeminate. So this idea of like reclaiming masculinity and the fear of like the feminization of men is present on the extreme side, but also, you know, it's at the top levels of Meta and the Republican Party.
It is present in basically every fascist movement. I mean, even if you look at the rise of in Nazi Germany, Hitler appealed to like this. What was it? Around a third of men were out of work around that time, and tried to appeal to that sense of a lost masculine ideal with nationalism, but also like, you know, giving people jobs and putting incentives to keep women in the home, producing Aryan babies. I mean, Viktor Orban is renewing this style of politics. This is not new, but it is new in the sense of like the influencer piece. So you guys spent a lot of time, or at least, you know, you got to peek under the hood and interview Andrew Tate in person. You saw this war room, and Matt was just alluding to this like recruitment effort. Just take us now inside of Tate's facilities and like what you saw and experienced as journalists firsthand when you went there. Either of you.
We first began by investigating his online kind of courses. The Hustlers University was one of them. It's now called The Real World, where you would kind of pay Andrew Tate to become an alpha male, supposedly like him, and that's probably one of his main ways of getting wealthy, right? Because these courses cost a monthly subscription, and once you're in there, you're becoming further radicalized. And essentially you're on the bottom rung of a pyramid. The next level up is the War Room, his elite society of real alpha males, which costs several $1,000s to join. And
this is a pyramid scheme.
It is a pyramid scheme, but it's a little bit more insidious than that. So it essentially, the War Room claims to be like an elite network of men. They had an event in Romania where it was called The Test, and you essentially paid thousands and thousands of dollars to go to Romania and to be tested by Andrew Tate and his team in a way that you didn't know what it was, and we were invited to do this. And on the first day in the kind of the mountains in Romania at this hotel, there's about 300 men, I forget now how many.
It was about 150 men in total, I think.
150 men who had all paid to be there, and Tate comes out. And he says, in 3 days' time, you know, you've each been paired with a professional MMA fighter, and you will be given the opportunity to fight this person in a ring on live Romanian television. It's a real fight. You could die. You know, none of you are getting any training or anything like that. You can say no, or you can say yes. And if you say yes, you know, this is a real fight. You could get seriously injured. And if you say no, well, we don't really talk about that for now. We later found out that if you said no, you were kind of forced to like sit facing a wall and journal about how shameful you were as a man. I said yes, because I wanted to like see how far.
I mean, you don't want
went.
to be a cuck, right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to be a cuck. But that is kind of it. Like, I mean, he created this like pressure cooker of male insecurity that, like, you know, I like completely fell for. I was like, I'm not gonna like not rise to this challenge. I want to prove that like lib cucks can be masculine too. But yeah, it did end up with me, you know, getting the crap kicked out of me in a cage fight in Romania, but then gaining their respect, and then interviewing Andrew Tate one final time where we put to him serious allegations of human trafficking.
Are you okay? Like, I mean,
yeah, I think I was fine. It wasn't that bad because I mean, like,
you had a bruised rib.
I had a bruised rib. I mean, like, I sort of like, I don't have any fighting experience, but I kind of managed to last quite a bit longer than other people because I asked someone who knew how to box, like, what for advice, and he said, you want to kind of, you're not going to win, so just kind of do ring craft, which basically means kind of like moving left and right and running around. But I just sort of like ran around in a circle, like away from this guy as he tried to hit me, and then kind of ended the fight on the ground by basically kind of grappling him, but, you know, really just kind of, I say grapple, kind of just like hugging him, almost requesting him to like stop the fight. And so then that happened. And yeah, it was like, you know, I had passed the test by getting into the ring.
I think the whole experience was very surreal because you had all of these like very cult-like soldiers coming to partake in the test, and they were being managed by Andrew Tate, his brother Tristan, but also just like the strangest array of men who called themselves generals. So there was one who went by the name Alpha Wolf. His real name was Kevin. There was another guy called Sartorial Shooter. Real name was Jewel. There was like an endless list of these like comic book characters. And that was one thing we always sort of grappled with, is like, Tate's fans are so obsessed with him and they see him as like this real successful man, but then he's like essentially surrounded by the cringiest losers you've ever seen, like grown men calling themselves Alpha Wolf, or this figure Iggy Semmelweis, who's like in his 60s, American guy from Chicago who's grown a huge long beard and is LARPing as a wizard. In our investigation, we essentially found out that he kind of created this character to be the spiritual leader of the war room that was based on an evil wizard from the Conan the Barbarian novels who traded in trafficked women and flared their skin to make books. But that was an aspect of the story that we had no idea we would uncover, right? When we first started with like, who's this growing obnoxious influencer who says like extremely problematic things about women? And we ended up confronting Iggy at his home in Koreatown, Hollywood, where he lives. And we had this very surreal experience where we sort of followed him through Hollywood for 20 minutes, looking like TMZ reporters, except we were asking him very serious questions because, as Matt spoke to, the war room isn't just a cult where Andrew Tate exploits men to get money out of them, right? Because that's essentially what he's doing. They're all paying him thousands of dollars a year. But he also teaches those same men how to exploit women to make money for themselves. And Iggy Semmelweis, or Miles Sonkin in particular, we uncovered, 2 years worth of messages from their private chat rooms. And he was guiding men around the world on how to essentially traffic women. He was saying, we want to try and isolate them from their families, isolate them from their friends, create false arguments, and then to get them to apologize, they have to tattoo your name on them. Oh, they don't want to do it. Here's pictures of other men with their women's name, other women with their boyfriends' names tattooed on them. Show them to the woman to guilt them into doing it. All of these sort of very classic trafficking techniques that you've seen, used across parts of the world and also in pimping culture. These were being taught directly in this war room. And that was kind of the culmination of our investigation. And we ended up speaking to women in the US who had been groomed by senior members of Andrew Tate's war room into working in webcam. We interviewed women in South America, in Europe. And it really, as we kind of uncovered, is one of the, or at least at the time, was one of the largest grooming networks in the world.
If you could just expand on that, it would be, I think, helpful for people, perhaps if they know somebody that's experienced this.
Of course, yes. So what it appeared that they were using in these messages and in everything we uncovered, the women we spoke to, and also what Andrew and Tristan Tate are accused of doing in Romania is using what's known as the lover boy method. And Matt actually asked Tate about the lover boy method the first time we interviewed him properly. Matt said, "Have you ever heard of the lover? Have you heard of the term lover boy?" Sorry. And Andrew Tate immediately went, "The lover boy method? Yeah, what about it?" So he immediately kind of knew what it was, this sort of academic term that's used in human trafficking and pimping. And what these men do is they basically aim to seek out women who they see as particularly vulnerable. It's typically young, small social circle, and working a low-income job. So we saw messages where they suggested looking for people that worked in Starbucks or McDonald's, young women kind of in those in-between life jobs. And these men teach each other how to build Instagram profiles to make themselves appear to be more impressive. And we saw courses, manuals that they actually send to each other. And it's like, rent a black BMW for the day, buy a plain white shirt, park it up here, take some pictures. And they'll build these Instagram accounts that make them seem very wealthy and, successful men. And they will approach these women appearing to just want a date, want a relationship. And what those women don't know is that those same men have an ulterior long-term motive, which is essentially get them into a position where they will work for them on webcam and give them, all of the money ideally, but failing that 80% of the earnings was typically what we saw. And it's through a gradual process, which they themselves refer to as kind of Pavlovian conditioning, how you would train a dog. So you reward when they show behavior you want to see, and you punish when there's behavior that you don't support. And it's some of those methods we spoke about, Iggy talking about again, trying to get them to get their name tattooed on you, isolating them from friends and family, making them financially dependent. They really strongly advise that the women themselves never have any login details or know the name of the account because they don't want them having access to it. And it's a large issue. We're not talking small amounts of women we saw. It was large amounts of women spread across the world who'd seemingly been victim to this. And some of them still may not know. A lot of these women we spoke to, it wasn't until one of them uncovered one of Andrew Tate's courses that she realized, oh, exact lines that Andrew Tate has told people to use were used on me. In fact, there's one thing they teach men to do to try and find sort of more susceptible women. They say, on the first date, request that the young women bring you a very particular box of chocolates, because most women would say, no, you're really weird, I'm not bringing you a box of chocolates. But the ones who say yes might be more susceptible to this sort of gradual process of manipulation. And in either kind of like a wild ego trip from Andrew Tate or in a kind of wink, wink joke to the men he teaches how to use these methods, when we tried to interview Tate after he was released from jail after 6 months he spent there after his first arrest, he insisted that Matt brought him a box of chocolates to grant an interview. So we had this kind of crazy back and forth with him where he insisted he needed them for energy to be able to conduct the interview, even though it was Ramadan and he was allegedly fasting as a now devout Muslim. But yeah, I think like it's an incredibly horrible and brutal method of grooming women, right? It preys on this really core, beautiful thing that all human beings have, which is like a desire to find someone that loves them and love them back. And they take that and they turn it into a way to exploit women for money. And that's where it's kind of the underlying thread through all of Andrew Tate's work, from my opinion. It's why we called our second documentary for the BBC, Andrew Tate, the Man Who Groomed the World, because that is truly what he's done. The young men who've fallen for him, they're sending him money. The young women who come into his circle, they end up having to give him money. It all ends with Andrew Tate getting your money. And that's kind of his end goal in life, from what I can see.
And in the end, the men that are participating in the exploitation, they are also searching for meaning. It's a perverted sense of meaning. But, I think that when you can have control over a woman in your life, or maybe many women, because this is almost like a step up from, I want to be able to abuse my wife and control who she sees and who she doesn't. This is about almost like creating a harem or a group of women that are like, I saw a review in Dissent magazine of your guys' work that was really well thought out, and they talked about how it's like the gig worker of female exploitation, and that's the model, I guess. So just to kind of close here, Matt, if you could just talk about how it is just this cycle of alienation and maybe the more specific flavor of exploitation of women that this, it's more modernized and what it represents.
Yeah, I mean, it's modernized in a number of ways. First of all, because the net that these men who seek to groom and manipulate women can cast is much wider, because they're doing it through social media, sending hundreds and hundreds of messages a day, doing things like, search a random city, maybe in a poor country, search nightclubs in that city, see all the women who have been to that nightclub or liked it, and then message all of them in a day, kind of thing. And then you'll eventually find women who are susceptible for whatever reason to your grooming tactics, and employ the kind of training manual provided by the war room and how to groom and brainwash them into subservience. And yeah, this isn't just like the pickup artists of back in the day, or like, this is how you get laid. It's like, this is how you train, you find, groom, and manipulate women. Or maybe you already have a girlfriend. This is how you train her to be submissive. Or maybe it's your wife. Maybe it's how you train your wife to be submissive. This is how you dominate, women, basically. And I think that really comes from a place of like deep insecurity about your own masculinity, a real like fear that if you're not dominating other women in this way, if they're not fully subservient to you, then you're not really a real man. And you see Andrew Tate doing it online. He seems to have all these women at his beck and call. You see Fresh and Fit doing it. Why do I not have that as a man? Why am I, and that leads to a really essentially a very dangerous bastardization of the pickup artist game, if you will, which is turning it into a kind of a grooming tactic. I mean, Jamie and I have spoken to almost 100 Tate supporters in our time investigating him. Not a single one has ever come across as happy to us. I think, a lot of them have been, they feel as though they've lost their relationships with the women in their life. They've lacked a real meaningful relationship with the women, but also because this group and this kind of ideology and the online community behind it also drives you away from your friends, from your family, from other sources of authority, whether that's teachers, therapists, anything. They make you mistrust everyone. Other men in your life are competitors. If they don't agree with you, then ditch them. Don't have them in your life. So they're really lacking in meaningful social relationships. They're encouraged to get rich by trading crypto. Stay at home, stay at your computer, trade crypto, get rich. Okay, you're not good at fighting, you're weak. Learn like a fighting sport, a combat sport. Become more of a man that way. Become richer, and then eventually dominate women. And nowhere are they saying like, go out and make some friends. Like, go do go
be a part of your community, go to a book club, do a trivia night, join a union.
Team sport, anything.
Go to the pub with your friends or anything. Nothing that is beneficial really for men to hear is in this advice.
It's the cycle. It literally is. He's not trying to make them happier or even have a do what he says of like being super popular with women. It's about continuing to isolate them so they keep coming back for the fix and keep paying him money for the advice that's not helping them. But I really appreciate your guys' time today. It's a fascinating conversation, and you really did old school, like, investigative journalism here. I mean, Matt even got beat up for this. So everybody, for that reason, check out their book. It's called Clown World, 4 Years Inside Andrew Tate's Manosphere. We'll put a link to that below wherever people are listening to or watching this. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, folks, with that, we're going to wrap up the first part of this program and head into the fun half, where we will take your calls. I think the phones are fixed. Is that?
They worked yesterday.
They worked yesterday.
Oh, shit. Well, we'll probably have to...
But
they
no.
might work today.
Maybe.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see. On ESPN today, Bradley and we're going to go on a little hiatus after this because I am very busy with politics, and then also my wedding is not too far away. So
And football's over, and that's really all you can.
Yeah, but I mean, I need a break for like to do all this other stuff. So, but this will be our final episode for a little while. We'll start probably again at some point, maybe the NBA playoffs and things like that. But you'll see who is the one who lost our little competition. Kowalski sent us extremely sour candy that is supposed to be the punishment that we're going to ingest. So youtube.com/ESPN show 4 p.m. today. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
I'll say that in a second. There's something I want to talk about that kind of draws both of these interviews together, though.
Sure.
It was interesting, the issue of it being easier to demonize trans women now because of online. I think there's I've been noticing a few things. Like, it's easier the way that organizing is done online has been in my mind a lot because I'm talking to Eric Blanc on Left Reckoning in a forthcoming episode. And he talks about a lot of the lessons from previous unionization pushes are the same for workers. It's similar types of guidance and stuff like that. The one thing that new unions have to emphasize that didn't need to be emphasized back 80, 70 years ago is to socialize. Because back then people were way more social. They were living closer together. Their jobs had more sociability. There was a greater civic life. Now people live farther apart. Every 10 minutes that you have to commute to work correlates with a 10% decrease in your civic engagement, apparently. And this is bad, that all this stuff is mediated, whether our understanding of like trans individuals, which I remember growing up in the 90s, there would be people that were ambiguous in terms of what their gender was. And it was just like another part of life. That was in North Dakota. Like, it wasn't this crazy thing. But now, because of the heightened visibility, it's the same thing with young men online, this stuff. And it's not new that men are anxious about, like, say, losing their virginity or whatever. But now they can go online and join a community and have people pick that scab over and over and over again until it becomes a pathology. Same thing with young women looking for any kind of place in this world, and just so happen to be attractive enough so that these sort of same people picked up by Andrew Tate can use the internet to market them for their own profits. It's horrible. The only thing we need to do, or the solution is, though, I mean, I remember early online, the atheist movement was one of my first things. I bought a Richard Dawkins, "I'm out as an atheist," North Dakota, look out. That was, I think, genuinely interesting.
Yeah.
As a way of like having ideological affinity groups drawn and organized over the internet. But the real way that we're empowered is as workers. And so when Eric Blanc in this book talks about Starbucks workers basically igniting themselves across the country, Amazon workers igniting across the country, not labor union staff, but people seeing online other people unionizing, standing up for themselves, and saying, hey, we can just do that here too. We need to become more focused on what actually empowers us, which, of course, boycotts and stuff of, say, stuff in the West Bank is good. We are empowered a little bit as consumers, but we need to develop worker power. And the internet, I think, can be used to do that. It's just been used to divide us along these lines of, like, anxieties about your love life and stuff like that, which is all getting worse because we're not fundamentally addressing what's drawing us apart, which is capitalism.
And it undercuts human connection, simple as that. And when you're antisocial, you're going to be more right wing. That's just kind of how it goes.
It's easy. Yep. You're less, and it's like Eric Blanc said, it is harder now because people don't have that connections. Chris Small said we needed to have like banquets and stuff multiple times because people would come around food and you socialize around food. So like that sort of thing. And also the weird thing is because of this lack of sociability, one of the places we do socialize is at work and stuff like that. And you become close with your workers. That needs to be turned into, yes, we all have each other's backs. And this is a place that we can find meaning, not in sort of consumptive choices.
Yes, exactly right. Left Reckoning, though, Matt, what's going on there?
Like I said, we got Left Reckoning, we got Eric Blanc.
Sorry.
Also, Kylie Chung of Jezebel was on Tuesday's show. She's one of the best writers on the assault on abortion rights and reproductive health. So she talked to us about criminalizing pills, Louisiana doctors suing Texas, or Louisiana courts suing Texas, or New York doctors and all this other crap. So patreon.com/Left Reckoning to support us there.
Absolutely. Check it out. Also, people are confused on the IMs. I am not going on a hiatus from the show. I'm just saying I have planning to do the weddings in June. That's why for ESVN, it's just like also with all the Trump stuff. I'm diving in on politics right now. Dave from Jamaica, Matt, 100% correct. How antisocial things have gotten. And before we get to hello guys, hello friends, I wanted to plug this. So Russell Vogt of Project 2025 and the OMB has set up a snitch line for the CFPB, which basically is a phone number where you can tip off folks if the CFPB is doing their job. Workers there. Russ Vogt is currently encouraging people to snitch on them. And, it's just odd when people do things like that. There's just this possibility that a lot of people could call that tip line and maybe provide false reports to them so that they have to divert their resources and go after, dead ends and
do what Elon
That'd be
Musk
horrible. I hope nobody
horrible.
does that.
What they're doing, like, you've got to flood their noise, flood with noise so they can't get the signal. That's what all this AI slop and stuff is going on for people trying to understand the world in the right way. To the extent these freaks want to hunt, whether it's trans people or be pro-scammer, or hunt people who, go get abortions, you need to flood those channels.
Yes. So it'd be a real shame. It'd be a real shame if people called that tip line and provided some false information. What's up, guys? What's up, Bender? What's up, Brandon?
How you doing?
Hey.
Nothing much. I mean, I'm just shocked that there's like a line that you can use to like snitch on Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, like workers, if they're trying to help people. But I assume it's for like business owners. It's for like, banks, the bank employees to call if like they're being under investigation.
Yeah. If you're a scammer and is getting any kind of static.
So what's happening on the discourse, Brandon?
Yesterday we watched that incredibly bizarre video of Elon Musk in the Oval Office doing his best Brad Dourif and Lord of the Rings impression. And we talked about, basically Trump's, various executive orders, the various attempts to defund institutions for what, under the context of an assault on the middle class. Like, this is capital using the Republican Party to try to destroy what's left of the American middle class, amongst other things. And tomorrow, I think, in honor of RFK Jr. being confirmed, we'll probably just do a lot of conspiracy stuff. Maybe, oh my God, maybe we'll watch the COVID misinformation video about it being snake venom. But that will definitely get my channel
taken down. All right. Well, maybe if you really, really repeatedly emphasize it, but it's insane. We'll talk about this more in the fun half, but I don't have kids, so that's the thing, Bender, with the lack of vaccination, it's got to be a little bit scary right now, I'd imagine.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're in New York a bit safer than I would say a lot more than a bit safer, much safer than the rest of the country. I mean, I've looked at the vaccine rates, and there's maybe 5 or 6 states, including New York, that are in the herd immunity 95% plus range, and everyone else is below that. So
right. But if measles metastasizes,
absolutely.
Because enough people aren't, I don't know if metastasize is the right word, but people know what I mean. If the virus updates itself because enough people aren't vaccinated, it's going to affect us all. So
absolutely.
Anyway, what's happening with your work?
Last night on Doomed, on the live stream, youtube.com/Matt Binder, I had writer and illustrator Jim DiBartolo on to discuss the billionaire class, because he's got a new graphic novel out, or coming out, called F Billionaires, which looks at our wonderful billionaire problem. So check that out for sure.
All right, guys. We're going to try with the phones. We'll see you on the other side. Attempt it. And if not, we'll just do some clips. See you in the fun half.
Okay, Emma, please.
Well, I feel that my voice is sorely lacking on the Majority Report.
Wait, look, Sam is unpopular.
I do deserve a vacation at Disney World. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Emma to the show.
It is Thursday.
Yeah, I think you need to take over for Sam.
Yes, please.
No. I'm gonna pause you right there.
Wait, what?
You can't encourage Emma to live like this. And I'll tell you why. So was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. So was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
What?
Tour, sushi, and poker.
Tim's upset?
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. So was offered a tour, sushi, and
that's what we call it in the biz.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Right.
Tour, sushi, and poker.
We're gonna get demonetized.
I just think that what you did to Tim Pool was mean.
Free speech.
That's not what we're about here. Look at how sad he's become now. We shouldn't even talk about it, because I think you're responsible.
I probably am in a certain way, but let's get to the meltdown here.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Oh my God.
Tour,
wow.
Sushi.
I'm sorry, I'm losing my fucking mind.
So was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Logic.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Boy. Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid.
Had this debate 7,000 times.
A little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour. I'm losing my fucking mind.
Some people just don't understand.
So I'm not trying to be a dick right now, but like, I absolutely think the U.S. should be providing me with a wife and kids.
That's not what we're talking about here. Okay, all right.
It's not a fun job.
Tour.
That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing.
Willy Wonka tour.
That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing.
What's that offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing.
What's that offered a tour?
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Rogan has done it again.
That offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's
poker with the boys.
I think he might be blowing it out of proportion.
Real thing.
That's poker with the boys. That offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's
poker.
Let's go, Joey.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Take it easy, bro.
Tour, sushi, and poker.
Things have really gotten out of hand.
Sushi and poker with the boys.
Delusional.
Tour,
Deluded.
sushi.
You don't have a clue as to what's going on. Live YouTube.
Sam has like the weight of the world on his shoulders. Sam doesn't want to do this show anymore. It was so much easier when the Majority Report was just you. You were happy.
Let's change the subject.
Right.
Rangers and Knicks doing great.
Now shut up. You don't want people saying reckless things on your program.
That's one of the most difficult parts about this show.
This is a pro-killing podcast.
I'm thinking maybe it's time we bury the hatchet.
Left is best. Pilot.
Tour.
Don't be foolish, and don't fucking tweet at me, and don't bitch. The way Emma has cucked all of these people, love it.
That's where my heart is, so I wrote my honors thesis about it.
Oh,
Sorry,
she wrote an honest thesis. I guess I should hand the main mic to you now.
You are to the right of me on foreign policy.
We already fund Israel, dude. Are you against that?
That's a tougher question I have an answer to.
Incredible theme song.
Hi, Bumbler.
Emma Vigeland, absolutely one of my favorite people. Actually, not just in the game, like period.
Back date first.
Guys, back.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. We say back in 3, 2, 1, and everyone's just trying to squeeze in one more little comment to chat, but we're past the buzzer at that point.
Turns out Matt Schlapp is a big old predator. Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? Yeah, we're making fun of Matt Schlapp. It's hard to make fun of him. What a,
when he's clearly like a horror movie person come to life.
Well, it's like his name in and of itself is insane.
Look at the picture.
Schlapp.
There's a picture. I can't remember when it was. I think it was like probably 8 or so years ago of him and Mercedes Schlapp in their dining room. And it's like, this is one place you need to make sure you are gone before the lights go down outside.
I mean, I honestly, look, these women are complicit, but I think about Michelle Bachmann too. And it's like, girlfriend, like, your husband's gay. Your husband's gay. Just move on with your life.
I think Mercedes Schlapp is as big of a monster.
Totally. Yeah.
Like, she's psycho.
I think a lot of these people are.
Though.
Yeah. Mercedes Schlapp.
Mercedes Schlapp. That's a great sounding name.
That is,
it really rolls off the tongue.
If you're like, I don't know, an 80s sort of comedy writer making a Nazi name.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like maybe like a regional rapper, like a regional Southern rapper, like Mercedes Schlapp. Like,
right.
That's a subgenre of Texas hip hop.
Yeah.
Mercedes Schlapps. Like, but it is like a luxury car and then the most unattractive, like, brute last name you could think of.
It actually
Real
sounds
contrast.
like a name for like one of those new like spoken word rappers that are all over Instagram.
Yeah. All right, guys, gonna open up the phone lines. Let's see if this works. Fingers crossed. The number is 646-257-3920. Let's read some IMs. Southpaw Wielding. I have a volunteer meeting with Foods Not Bombs this weekend, and I've applied to be a community organizing committee member with my local county Dems. We are getting organized this year, baby. Love it.
Love to hear it. So much better than We're So Cooked.